This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by
freekeen.com.
New Hampshire tax protester Ed Brown engaged in what the media is calling an outburst. It happened during the beginning of his second trial, at least his second federal trial. Brown objected to having an attorney that he didn't want. He says he doesn't want public defender Michael Iacopino to represent him. I'm not sure if I'm saying the name right. This exchange happened either 1 hour or 1 day before I got there to witness the events of June 30th. By the time I arrived around 9:30 on the 30th, it was day 2 of the Brown trial, and Brown and Iacopino seemed to be relating fairly well. This was nothing like the sort of hostility I saw between Danny Riley and his court-appointed attorney. Anyway, I want to go into a little bit of detail regarding the things that Brown's attorney had to say during his opening statements. Iacopino said basically, the Brown defense begins on June 7th, many months after their standoff in Plainfield, New Hampshire began. By way of background, Ed Brown and his wife, Elaine, led a 9-month standoff in the woods of northern New Hampshire. They had holed up in their house after authorities convicted them of refusing to pay federal income tax. They holed up in their house after refusing to attend a tax trial they called unfair. Iacopino said roughly 6 months into their trial, 74 U.S. Marshals, 21 other law enforcement personnel, 37 state troopers, and significantly, 2 Massachusetts law enforcement officers appeared at or near the Brown home. He also said there were 21 New Hampshire National Guardsmen. Most of these numbers, apparently, are not disputed by the feds. He said this show of force scared the living daylights out of the Browns. He said their interactions with the federal government had, quote, never ended in anything but pain and suffering, unquote. He discussed a 2004 raid in which 20 agents, including a hilltop sniper, first arrested Brown by tackling him outside his Plainfield office. Iacopino said, quote, give my client a fair shake, unquote. He said Brown's beliefs were unusual, but he said, quote, it's not reasonable for the government to try and kill somebody for a tax violation, unquote. He said there were no threats from the Brown household between January and June. He said the non-standoff standoff was exactly what the prosecution originally called it, a peaceful tax protest. He says the alleged threats were just Ed articulating his principles. They had a very reasonable reason to believe the government was trying to kill them, he said. The only people that fired a shot, he said, were employees of the United States government. Iacopino said, quote, the defense here is that Ed Brown had the right to defend himself, unquote. Now, I do want to point out, from my understanding of the situation, is that Ed Brown, in fact, never did lay hands on anyone during the standoff. The feds, on the other hand, did use violence, low-level violence, on 6 occasions. At least 6 occasions in relation to the standoff. Or maybe I should say in relation to their prosecution of the Browns. Iacopino said Brown maintained the peace the entire time, and that is all I remember from the Iacopino testimony, all I have notes for. Unlike Elaine Brown's attorney, Bjorn Lang, Iacopino was never interrupted or stopped by the judge during his presentation. And, of course, he never informed the jury that jurors have a right to acquit any time a law seems unjust. to them. Had he or anyone in the room done so, they would have been barred from the courtroom and probably prosecuted. Coming up later, more reports regarding the June 30th segment of the trial, including the testimony of head U.S. Marshal Stephen Monier.
This program is brought to you by freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.